Thank you, Osama, and thank you all for coming, and thank you, T-Hub, for hosting us. I can see that this house is sold out. Hello, Hyderabad. Well done. Uh, why this year, I think we have 2,000 registrations from last year's 400 is, I think it's due to AI. The targeting has been very good. Someone has put some sort of, a tool to target only the people who are interested in citizens. And I welcome you all, and thank you for coming, and thank you for such a good intro, Osama. So the subject of our first panel discussion is imagining a just future, intersections of access, rights, and AI. My name is Pankaj Pachori. Osama gave my introduction, but today I'll speak as a citizen, not as an NDTV anchor or Prime Minister's media advisor and so on. Intersections we are talking about, and I think we are sitting right now in Romania. Because the per capita income of Telangana is about Romanian per capita income, which is about $23,000. We have a lot of people who come from Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Gujarat, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar. These are people, and I'm going about this according to the Income Tax Department surveys. So the top 1,96,000 people in India, they earn more than 20 lakh rupees a year. So that's your Romania. After that, we have a very small layer between 10 lakhs and 20 lakhs, which is about Maldives. And rest of the India. And rest of the India is in Africa. Burkina Faso, Congo, Nigeria. Nigeria is even better, actually. So that is the kind of intersection Indian digital media is in. That we have a very top, what Osama talked about, only 6% people are more than 70% of financial transactions. That is the 6%. Only 7% people in India pay any substantial income tax. The rest have no income to pay a tax. And that is the challenge of this digital divide we keep talking about. Because the governments, the corporates who own the technology and platforms, they are interested only in consumers. They are interested only in the people who can subscribe to their different packages. They are not interested in people you people are interested in. There is a board outside, and you can see there that these are the Manrega workers who cannot be digitally certified, so they are as good as dead. And they are not getting their wages. So when I talk about Burkina Faso, I'm not being racist. And I'm not being elitist. That is the situation. So that's the black hole, which exists within India. Now you will say that the CEO of T-Hub was saying that a lot has been done. That's fine. The glass is half full or half empty. My job, I see as a citizen and as a journalist, is to keep my focus on the glass which is half empty. That's my job. And that's your job too. So thank you again. We'll continue with this conversation later. I have a very scintillating and very knowledgeable. Everyone here knows about digital more than me. So listen to them more, less to me. First, we'll go in a one round robin sort of a league, so we can talk about this main subject of the day, which is just future and the intersections and access and AI. So Soumya, I'll start with you. Soumya, as you know, has been the leading light in the state before and after its bifurcation. And she has very strong things to say. She's worked very closely with the governments and as in her capacity as a citizen also. So we'll start with that. So let's, I think we'll just do a round robin of your initial statements, and then we'll get into questions. And then we'll get into questions. I don't have many questions. You guys know more. You have more questions. Please ask more questions. Make my job easier. Soumya.
So one of the thoughts that I'd like to start with is just what we are talking about in terms of access to rights and rights to access. So if you try and figure out what comes first or what comes next, you cannot have any right without access. It's as simple. They are intertwined. So therefore, access to any form of rights has to be built into the right itself. So if I have to give you an example, in a digital ecosystem, when you say that you have to be able to access the database of, say, pensioners or somebody who requires a house, mostly benefits related to very poor people who live on the fringes. Like you said, it could be people who are living with less than 100 rupees a day. So if in that digital ecosystem, we end up saying that you have to be able to identify yourself to a system as alive to be able to get a pension. And the ecosystem is built in a way where A, access is difficult. B, you're lying at home, you're a 96-year-old, you cannot get up and come out. Nobody comes to your house to check whether you're alive or dead. For that digital ecosystem, you're as good as dead. So while you are alive, you are desperate for a pension. That's the only thing that's going to keep you alive. You do not, you're not able to access it because your access to that database is restricted. And these are cases where in a digital ecosystem, I think we are very used to, and I've been in government now for 18 years, I quit last year. And I found that we love numbers. So we say, हमने 10 लाख लोगों को दे दिया, 1 करोड़ लोगों को दे दिया, उसमें अगर 10% को नहीं मिला तो आप इतना हवा क्यों, why are you making such a fuss about it? What is 10% of 1 crore? Those numbers, if you're not able to reach, then I think your digital ecosystem basically fails the poorest of the poor. So in terms of the right and access debate, I think the two today in a digital ecosystem are far too intertwined. You cannot see them separately because they are not separate. I mean, they are no longer separate. RTI, for instance, is a physical law where you go and you apply for information. अगर आपकी application नहीं ली जाती है, तो आप immediately appeal में जा सकते हो, आप complaint कर सकते हो. लेकिन अगर एक database आपको मरा हुआ घोषित कर देता है, तो BDO के सामने आप उसको ले जाओ और कहो कि ये है भाई जिंदा है. They will turn and say, मैडम ये हमारे हाथ में नहीं है, ऊपर वालों ने हमारा हाथ बांध दिया है. So what do you do when the access itself becomes impossible?
I promise not to ask questions, but are we then getting into a situation that despite the digital access in terms of services to citizens, now there's one more Babu we have created, which is the app.
A Babu who is a Pratyaksh Babu. वो आपके सामने प्रकट नहीं होता है. अगर आप कंप्लेन करना चाहते हो, you pick up a phone, you dial today, any of us sitting in this, you call any customer care service, you're speaking to a robot. Now, I mean, I'll give you an example. From years ago, we had a friend who used to work in the MKSS area, and when his girlfriend used to call from the US, she was an American, whoever picked up the phone would say machine बोल रही है, because they only recognized an American voice as machine. आज हम सब machine से बोल रहे हैं. All of us, whether we want, and the poorest of the poor are worst affected in this, because they are made to wait for hours. And realizing that a person is alive, realizing that a person has been denied, the local person who knows that person, you are tying his hands because you say corruption बहुत बड़ा मुद्दा है, हम करप्शन को कर्ब करना चाहते हैं तो सबसे बढ़िया डिनाई मतलब राइट ही मत दो ना. ना रहेगी बांस ना बजेगी बांसुरी. So you don't give them their right because you're just putting one roadblock after the other. And in this case, it's not a physical roadblock.
Access to rights. That's completely understood. And in a country like India, which I talked about, we have 18 languages, I think, on our currency notes, so people can understand that what the currency note is talking to, what its promises to different people who need different languages. And here we are in a situation where the AI has to sort of decide that when you are talking to a machine, it's not translating simultaneously in 18 languages, and even if it does, it will have very funny sort of outcomes if you try to, try to translate something from Google. And you'll be, that's a best joke which is going around. So that's again a access problem, because we are a very large country, so many languages, coast pe pani badle char coast pe bani. At every 4 kilometers in India, a language changes. So you can imagine the diversity of this country. And Rakshita is with us, who's also been working. How many of you have used Zomato or Swiggy? All these people, you need to know what happens to the gig workers who are serving Zomato and Swiggy, and Rakshita is the right person to talk about that. She's worked a lot with the gig workers who are at your back end and who are giving you your samosas and your cocktails or whatever you are ordering. Rakshita.
So definitely, I mean, I think the whole attempt of looking at a just future can't really begin if we don't truthfully acknowledge the present. So even just trying to understand what's going on, gig workers definitely, and we're also having a dedicated session for it. But we also want to try and share with people that what are the claims that digital technologies were introduced with. There are two things that I primarily want to use this platform to talk about, and maybe the second through the questions I'll try and make time for. But ये digital interventions जब introduce किए जाते हैं, तब क्या तीन चार चीज़ें बोल के they were introduced, and we want to try and show that today's reality is in a situation that not only are we achieving what the stated intention and the stated claim was, we're also leading to a whole lot of other exclusions which power or state calls collateral damage. So we started with that लोगों को databases से हटाने पड़ेंगे ताकि corruption जो illegible लोग हैं जो गलत benefits ले रहे हैं वो सब हटे, so that more eligible people can come onto our database. We've seen people are being excluded, ineligible people still being on databases. No ration list has opened out to include so many more people who have actually been excluded because of the 2011 census still being the base document in 2024. So we're seeing that the whole attempt of trying to clean up databases through digital technology in the name of reducing corruption and in the name of increasing access to those who deserve it is actually not happening. All of those people are very much still in the databases, and we've led to, like we'll see in the session at 4 o'clock, the kinds of people who are out of the database. Second, we're saying digital technology is going to be used to control corruption. We are going to make sure incorrect people don't access and the correct people are taking on. We will see examples. I won't take much time here. Facial recognition is being used on a program like Narega, which is being implemented in 6 lakh villages. What all is being done to look at controlling corruption, and none of that is being achieved. And what in turn it's led to, and the kinds of workers who are not able to even recognize their attendance. The third kinds of things that are introduced is that एक identity card बन जाएगा, आधार एक होगा, after that none of it, you will not have to go with different identity cards and prove yourself again and again. We are seeing the total opposite of that happening. You get an Aadhaar and now you have to do NPCI seeding, you have to do this verification, you have to get an OTP. There are 4 levels added on top of it. So just this idea that much of what is being introduced in the name of digital technology what are its claims need to be thoroughly interrogated. If we have to start imagining a just future, we have to recognize what actually is not, what injustice is happening today. And second thing that I do want to share about is, and touching to the gig issue, is that we are also not a community which has got this very sorry face on digital technology. We are not saying we're anti-digital tech. There is immense possibility of digital technology. And where we are the ones fighting, saying through digital technology आप automatic registration कर सकते हो, gig workers का social security बन सकता है through every delivery, एक portal में सारी सूचनाएं public domain में आ सकती है. These are all possibilities only leveraged through digital technology, and we are seeing the resistance to it. We are seeing governments refusing to do it, legislations not coming through because of vested interests. So here we are saying that when we want to leverage digital technology to show what's possible from the point of view of workers, ordinary people, it's being resisted. So there is a hypocrisy which needs to also come out. We are not anti-tech, anti-digital and only crying about what's going wrong. When we want to assert ourselves and show how it can be done, power comes in the way and it's resisting because it understands what its potential is.
So the power, as Mao said, used to be earlier in the barrel of the gun. Now the power is in the coder. That is the basic change, which is happening. Rakshita talked about that the digital platforms, the digital way of life was being touted as a counter to corruption. UPI payments in last 12 years have gone into billions. But at the same time, the currency in circulation has also increased than it was when demonetization took place. So that's the best sign and the best indicator too, that the corruption has not been controlled because we are into a digital payment now scenario in the country. And someone has to really, really work hard on that, starting from the Reserve Bank of India, that why is this happening in this country? So that's another thing. We move on to now Sonia Hoy. I think that's the right pronunciation. George, okay. Fine. So she's been working in about 50 countries, and she's the most traveled person, I think, which we have on the dais here today. She was the founder of A for AI. Before many people knew what AI was, she was already grappling with AI and what's happening. And now she runs the Global Digital Inclusion Partnership, which is at the central theme of our summit today. Sonia, can you bring in from your experiences across the globe, what has worked and what has not?
No, it's okay. I think it's good. Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you also for including us here. It's really a pleasure to be back from last year, and it's really wonderful to learn from so many of you here in Hyderabad for these next 2 days. So in terms of what we've learned, and also what we still need to learn, but let me start with what we've learned. The first thing is that access is a much more complex concept than we tend to think about. And I want to talk about something that Osama actually mentioned when he was introducing our organization and myself, which is this concept of meaningful connectivity and meaningful access. And the reason why I want to start with that is one of the things that we've learned is that we can't divorce, right? We can't separate these different elements of what it means to be a digital citizen as if they were standalones. They have to be connected. And in this idea of meaningful access, what we look at is a holistic way of thinking about what does it mean for us to engage in technology, to benefit from the opportunity of technology in a way that it's safe, empowering, interesting, protecting, etc. And so this concept comes from the idea that to be a digital citizen, to be a person engaged in digital society, not only we have to have affordable access to a level of connectivity that is reliable, quality, in terms of speed, data, etc., as well as the kind of device that you have to be able to access digital services and products. And then also, just as importantly, that meaningfulness comes from the content that you have access to. It comes from the skills that you use, that you gain to be able to benefit from the content, the information, the services, and products. And all of that rests on the idea that not only access to the internet and to technology in general is a right, but in fact, that whole experience of having access, of meaningful access, really needs to be rights respecting. And with that, if you think about all of those elements that I just mentioned, then you start understanding that there's a lot of inequality and a lot of exclusion in the world of access, because the truth is, even in this room, of all of you who are interested in learning about the Digital Citizen Summit, AI, accountability, and all of these issues, you all have very disparate types of access. And one that I like to use as an example is that regardless of how you see it, the women in this room make less money than the men on average, not just in India, but in many parts of the world. Because of that, the level of access that they have, not just that they can afford, the level of devices and the functionality of those devices is going to be less than the men. The type of data and speed that they have, so the quality of the connection that they have, is going to be more limited, more narrow, if at all. And their ability to then access the level of information and skills and exercise their rights as citizens are going to be more limited than those of the men in this room. And that is unacceptable. So when you start thinking about what meaningful access means, and you look at this all of these critical elements of that experience, then you start realizing how much work we have to do. Okay? So I'll just start with that, because I think that creates a framework of understanding not just where we need to be, the challenges that we are facing, but also recognizing from the start of this discussion all of the inequality and exclusion that we ourselves in this room have the responsibility to tackle and change.
Thank you. And there's something, you can all read, the GSM reports comes out every year. And about South Asia, you can see in the GSM report that the smartphone penetration is always tilted towards more men than women. So there you go, all your apps, all your AI, all your chat GPT, it's like limited, it's working on the side of male gender than females, because they do not have the infrastructure, basically. And this is all across South Asia in the report. It comes out, you can go online and read that report every year. And but talking about infrastructure, now the thing is that when we talk about access, we can have a highway next to your home where you can drive at the speed of 120 miles an hour, but if you don't have a car, you can't use that. It's useless to you because you have a dirt track where you are driving your bullock cart. That is the kind of digital divide we are looking these days. And that's why, if you look at our country, there is more stress on making highways and bullet trains than making small roads which connect different villages of the country. If the farmer has no road from his farm to the highway, he cannot get his produce and infrastructure. And that brings me to a person who is worked a lot on infrastructure. Rajneesh is the CEO of APNIC, and you worked with ISOC also earlier, and all your .NET and .gov and all that kind of stuff, he knows everything inside out, okay? Infrastructure. Do you think that just creating infrastructure, as we are doing right now, is leading to a situation that where we are creating actually a new kind of colonialism, where the owners of the platform, owners of the technology, the users of the technology are the colonial powers and the rest are subjects?
So, interesting premise, Pankaj. You, of course, keep the hard question for me, right? Okay, so let's maybe unpack that a little bit. When someone can't develop that infrastructure and someone else sees an opportunity, they'll step in. It's an open market system, it's a competitive market, etc., etc. At least that's what we aspire for in most parts of the world to be. What we've had in the Asia Pacific at large, but particularly in South Asia, if you look at the statistics, more than half the population is still online. So just, as I said, let me just unpack that a little bit so that I can answer your question better. The problem is that if you have half the population offline, it also has a direct relationship to what infrastructure exists. But it's not just about running cable or setting up satellite links or whatever else it may be. I think you also have to take into account that this South Asia in particular is a very tough terrain to work in. You've got the tallest mountains, for example. You've got some of the most powerful rivers and valleys, and it goes on, and jungles. And you know, having worked in infrastructure for quite a while, in fact, most of my career in some way or form, most of the time, deploying infrastructure becomes a political problem, not necessarily an economic or financial or technology problem. The technology is actually the easy bit. To connect two cities, you know, one of the biggest problems we've ever had in past work that I've done, a simple thing called right of way. No, you can't dig there, you can't use that, right? And it just becomes so complicated. So as I said, let me unpack a little bit here and there. But I don't want to get into the weeds, you know, perhaps in the breaks we can have if someone wants to talk about that. The question about, you know, the new colonial powers on the internet, and I think it goes to what I was just alluding to before, that what we have is there's a space or vacuum that exists that some entity can step into. Now, government might not have the priorities or the economic or financial capacity to work in that space, so private sector steps in. Now, private sector should be held to account. And by the way, I should say one thing missing on this panel is the private sector. And you know, maybe that's something we may want to look at in future. So that perspective is also very important, right? But the question then becomes, if someone else, a private sector, I'll give you another example. Most of the submarine cables being deployed around the world right now are not being done by governments or the old telecom companies. They're being done by the new age digital companies, right? In fact, Google and Meta are probably the largest cable owners in the world now. When I was in the telecoms world in the 1990s, so my background is telecom and power engineering. When I was working in that field, there was no concept of a content provider would actually be running cable and owning cable and selling services on that cable to telecom companies. It used to be the other way around. So the dynamics have completely changed, right? But it also is about money. It's also about having access to those resources to build those systems.
Investments.
Yeah. And where does the money come from?
Right? Where the money will come from and where the profits will come from after that. Because private sector, the motive is profit.
Absolutely.
There you go. So now, as you said, you know, most of the cables, which is basically your superhighways, you know, those are the highways on this. They are owned by a private sector. The governments will bring in regulations now and then and inadequately according to their needs and according to needs, political needs of the parties in power, kind of a thing. I've been working with the Sri Lankan government for last about 6 months, and one of the ideas was about T-Hub, by the way. We wanted to export T-Hub to Colombo, and the government changed. And the new government which has come in Colombo, they are not very inclined to have such a close cooperation with India. You are talking about, try opening any website which ends in .pk in India. That's the border. On one hand, we are talking about getting communities closer, but in India, we do not have access to Pakistani websites. I follow the Pakistani Foreign Ministry when they are having their summit there, and I thought I'll follow them very easily and I'll get the information which is there, but I cannot open a .pk file because someone somewhere on the superhighway has got a roadblock.
Use a VPN.
There's another. Now people will start selling VPN. That's a new market. Very good. Thank you very much, all. Now you heard enough, and I would like to throw it open for questions. I'm sure your minds are buzzing with questions. You can also later on tag people, ask them, send in their DMs, and really bombard them. Like 2,000 people collect, really bombard questions to people. But here in the hall, if anyone has any questions, please go ahead. Osama. Let's start from the toughest question. Come. Mike there.
Rajneesh wants to give away the mic. No, so I want to ask a question for each one of you, I mean, knowing a little bit of background also. I mean, for example, with Soumya, I would like to know is that, you know, accountability itself is a bigger issue in the platformization world. And most of the platforms are going unaccountable, and we don't see that platformization will be stopped. It will continue because it makes business sense. You know, a lot of people are signing up without question. So one is that how do we bring accountability to that one? And to Rakshita, I have a question is that, you know, one of the biggest thing in the digitization is the voice of the people. Earlier we used to have like people come on the road and do the agitation, right? That era is gone. So how do we put really citizen of modern world, digital citizen, put the voices? And to Sonia, you know, the language of masses is not becoming meaningful, connectivity. You know, meaningful connectivity is still considered to be a hi-fi kind of jargon or something like that. How do we make it a voice of the masses, you know? To Rajneesh, which is more, since you were co-founded this platform called DCS itself, you know, how do we bring this kind of platform to really go? I mean, we have reached to this number and this kind of voices, but how do we really go deeper where, you know, their multilingual voices can be heard in such a way by the technological people or development people? All the developers, they don't listen to the consumer. I mean, they just create and then they go to the consumers.
We'll start with Soumya. Here.
I'm going to do a little bit of Hindi and English to be able to also try and scale the language bar. Suchna ka adhikar, the right to information law, came from very poor people realizing that they are not able to access their right to minimum wage or to work in a corrupt ecosystem. And that battle actually led them to fight for a law which was to say, सारी सूचना पब्लिक करो, हमारे रिकॉर्ड्स को बाहर निकालो, हमारे काम के बारे में जितने भी आपके पास सूचना है वो निकालो. वी वुड लाइक टू नो कि हमने कितना काम किया है और हमें कितना आप wages दे रहे हैं. So that's where the RTI, the battle for the law began. I think today in a digital ecosystem, and I've often thought, do we really need one more law? I think we need an accountability law. You need to hold people accountable. I mean, how can you say that I've built, like there's a Harvard professor who said, code is law, and the what is architecture and code is law. code can't be law. I mean, if you have people who are excluded, if you have people who are deserving of a right, who are being denied their right, the Constitution provides under Section 32 that you can, if there's a denial of fundamental rights, आप सीधा High Court या Supreme Court जा सकते हैं. लेकिन एक डिजिटल इकोसिस्टम में आप केवल एक रोबोट से बात कर रहे हैं. There is no human being at the end of it, at the end of that conversation. So I think what we really need is an accountability law where every single person, including the person who's writing the code, is held accountable. You cannot say, I'm sorry, this is above me or beyond me.
Coda is the king, as we said.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And that's the next thing. Rakshita.
Yeah. Just to respond to that one specific thing of, it's absolutely true. There's also a reason why government prefers portals and helplines and websites, right? The state wants you to be one person challenging one authority. This individual pursuit ही रहे, लोग इकट्ठा ना हो, क्योंकि एक साथ ताकत बढ़ती है. That's exactly what they want to try and break, and which is why whenever you take an idea of a reform, grievance redress हो, accountability हो, governments are the most excited about portal खोल देंगे, helpline शुरू कर देंगे, portal खोल देंगे, app बन जाएगा, सब ठीक हो जाएगा. But we have to understand that not only is the fact that it's digital that it's the problem, but it's also hindering collective mobilization of people. They want you to just come to them as a person, not as a group of people, which will build on each other's strength. The thing about what is the way out, considering that this is only a trend that will continue, we definitely, and that's what we're advocating for everywhere, digital has to be a option. It cannot be the only option. You cannot leave people without multiple options to pursue their own path of accessing information, seeking redress, dissenting, filing complaints. You can't reduce all pathways to a digital pathway. Have a digital pathway, those who prefer it will use it, those who don't should not suffer. So physical face-to-face platforms have to complement, and face-to-face is what we're saying actually is what challenges power, challenges impunity of power. You need that opportunity of taking on.
Yeah, face-to-face here doesn't mean FaceTiming, okay? I think you all get that. Okay. One thing, Sonia, before you start, I'll just tell, from what she was saying, in 1980s, the government of India, the mighty government of India, found that there were 15 windows one had to go to if you wanted to start an enterprise, a factory or a production house or something. So the government said that we are going to have a single window for all these clearances. What happened? There was a 16th window. So, yeah. So you have to go to the 16th window to deal with the 15 windows. So now there are 16 windows because there's a new window which was opened. Similarly, you have all these bots, all these websites and all that, and if you complain too much about the government websites, they'll launch another website to deal with the inaccessibility of the other websites. So that's how we are leading to, and that's what's happening. Sonia, sorry, I just wanted to
No, it's fine.
that.
I think, so there's 2 points I want to make. One is that, again, a lot of these issues and what, my colleagues here are mentioning are issues that are really social in nature, right? Social and really embedded structural issues that it's not just about digital society, it's really about society in general and how social norms and culture and economic, circumstances determine how we engage with each other. I think what's important as digital society starts kind of leading a lot of how we interact is that, one, we cannot accept that digital society be a mirror of those inequalities and injustices and problems as you were raising. So we have an opportunity to make sure that, in a digital society, in a platform, in public services, we actually complement but fill the gap. And if we're not filling the gap, then technology is not really a problem-solving technique, right? So I want to point that out because I think a lot of times we think about technology as simply the solution for everything, and it can only be a solution if it's tackling all of these things together. So that's important. And then the other thing, which I know you didn't specifically ask, but we had discussed as part of this discussion, is that there are several efforts that are taking place to address a lot of these questions, a lot of these inequalities, and especially from a gender perspective, which is what I was focusing on earlier, addressing a lot of the gaps and what can we do to close the gender digital divide in general, not just here in India, but everywhere around the world, where sadly is still massive, including here, which is something that not just the government, but everyone needs to accept, recognize, so that it gets resolved. And one of the many ways in which we are doing that, besides our research, our work, which I hope you can see outside in our booths and throughout today and tomorrow in several discussions, one of the projects that we are very fortunate to be managing and supporting, and including here in India, is the Women in the Digital Economy Fund project that we mentioned to you, where we are tackling exactly these kinds of issues. So not only making sure that we are closing the digital gender digital divide, but we are doing by tackling those areas that not only keep women out of the digital opportunity, but also limit their ability to then really take full advantage, right, of when they come online. So it's not just about access and affordability and issues like that, but I mean, are the products and services, like you were asking, Osama, are the platforms welcoming to women? Are they designed for and by women? They are not, for the majority. So how can we change that? How can we make sure that products and services have diversity in mind, not just gender diversity, but different kinds of intersectional diversities that exist in our societies, right? Are we making sure that women just as men, girls just as boys, rural versus urban populations, marginalized, have the level of skills that are required? Can they come online for these public services that, right or wrong, a lot of them coming online, and many of us are dependent on accessing public services and many more through online platforms and online websites, what have you. Are people learning how to access these services in a safe way, in a way that is protecting, that women are not going to feel violated, abused, and they can actually have access to information and the services that they require without feeling that they are going to be attacked and victims of violence? Those are the kinds of things that we are tackling, for example, not just to close the divides, but to bring a lot more equality and humanity to what it means to be online, to what it means to have a productive, creative, and innovative online experience. And if we think from that perspective, I think we also challenge ourselves to address many of the questions that both of you were raising, which is, yes, we have to have an online and an offline world that are respecting of all of these issues and of people's rights to information, to services, etc. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. Thank you. Radnesh would like to address that.
So a couple of things you asked me, Osama. The first thing, so when I and Osama co-founded or co-created maybe these two events that are happening here in the next few days, one of the questions we always used to say or ask is, "Koi aayega?" And today, it's been an interesting experience for me because aaj hum keh rahe ki aaj mat nana, kal aana. So that's been an interesting journey over the last decade or so, or therefore. Now, in terms of these sort of digital spaces, now there's a lot of these types of things that happen across the world in different regions, in different countries, etc., etc. But as some of you who know me well know that I'm actually quite disillusioned with all those forums and events and whatnot. And there's a very simple reason for that. Because every year it's the same people talking about the same crap. They're wearing a different, maybe a bit older, and wearing different clothes perhaps on the day, in a different country. a lot of the same narratives are being repeated over and over again. Sometimes they're related to a particular agenda an entity has, not necessarily in private sector. Non-profits also have their agendas because money has to come from somewhere, right? So just because you're a non-profit or civil society doesn't mean that you are there for the people, not necessarily. There are issues with where and how do we create spaces for people that I can see in the audience. You should be here speaking, not me. I've been doing this for most of my career, which is in the 30 years now. I see some of my friends and colleagues that, we worked in the ICT for D-Field together in the 90s. Funnily enough, the questions and issues we were discussing 20, 30 years ago, they're still relevant today. We're still talking about access and rights to access and all that. We talked about that back then. The job obviously has not been done. What has happened, of course, is technology has advanced rapidly. It's far more integrated into society. We also have a far more informed society today. So that's where then these questions about accountability and security and other things start coming into play. And that's just the natural evolution of technology, right? So you can't say, okay, we'll stop all technological development. Let's go and fix all this accountability and all these other issues first, then we'll start again. Because then that's not opportunity cost, it's opportunity lost, right? Now, in terms of these sort of spaces, Osama, which is one of the other questions you asked, I would really like to see, the wisdom of the elders as we have on this panel is very nice. But sometimes we miss the ambition of the young in these conversations, right? And that's what I'd like to see.
I'll turn to the young. So
are you saying that you are much older than all of us here on the panel? Sorry.
Okay, so let's get the average age of the discussion down. So I saw some hands going up. We don't have much time, but still, you in the front, can you take this? Yeah.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the talk. My name is Vardhan Nair. I have two questions. One is for Soumya ma'am. So I'm working on, let me just sit down 1 second. So I've been working on data doubles and surveillance for a bit now. When you talk about navigating data doubles and surveillance, which is basically, what you were talking about, which is a person's identity in the database, just broadly. So when you talk about navigating digital ecosystems, some research that I was reading on the Aadhaar database and the exclusion within that format is that people would go to internet cafes, and the people running those internet cafes would help individuals with limited, let's say, digital literacy to process these forms and fill out whatever needs to be filled out for proper processing and quick processing. So in this sort of let's call it the digital ecosystem as you call it, where do you place these unofficial intermediaries that are just trying to help and get the job done quickly? Where do you place that? And secondly, just for the board, we talk about access a lot over here and digital access as well. To what extent is the definition of digital literacy, the official definition of digital literacy, falling behind, especially in India, wherein we have a, let's say, 52% internet penetration rate, but 38% digital literacy? Where is it sort of faltering, and do we need a data literacy as well in this concept? So just for the board broadly, and then for Soumya ma'am. Thank you very much.
Soumya, can you start with the first question, so then we can ask? Or you want to take that first? Okay.
So there are a lot of informal actors, a lot of do-gooders. It's not just people sitting in internet cafes. A whole lot of us sitting here who are part of the NGO network end up doing that, because the official PPP model, which is the e-Mitra or your Me Seva, makes money and makes more than they're actually supposed to make. So if you're supposed to get a death certificate for 50 rupees, you will end up paying 300 rupees for it, because that guy is doing you a favor. He's not doing his job. So a lot of dependence begins to take place when somebody says, you don't even need to pay that 50, I'll do it free of cost for you. I think that actually shows where the system is failing, because when you put in an entrepreneurial model for something that government should have actually in the first place given free of cost, then automatically you are also building in a whole lot of additional unseen costs which the poor have to end up paying. So naturally, I mean, their leaning is then towards, say, a civil society organization or a society do-gooder or even an internet cafe where somebody is willing to help them. But I think the fundamental question we really need to ask ourselves, which I once asked a minister, I'm not going to name the minister, why do we need the Aadhaar? This was when the Aadhaar debate was happening. Why do we need the Aadhaar? And pat came the answer, oh, to make sure कि beneficiaries ढंग से identify हो, corruption खत्म हो जाए, जिसको मिलना चाहिए उसी को मिले. I've sat in a social audit society for enough number of years to tell you that actually post-digital it's become more than it was earlier. But when I asked the same minister whether he had an Aadhaar card, he said, I'm not a beneficiary of the state. My first question is then where does your free petrol, your home, your benefits that you get for eating in the parliamentary canteen come from? So it's also the mindset. तुम corrupt हो, तो I have to fix you.
Yeah.
मैं दूध का दूल्हा हूँ, मैं तो गलत कर ही नहीं सकता हूँ.
I just want to give one example. आप कह रहे हो informal interpersonal. I just want to give an example that should leave us thinking a little bit. अभी जो हमारे camps हुए थे, pension verification camps, जिसके बारे में बहुत detail में 4 to 6 जो हमारी जनसुनवाई होंगी साथी है बोलेंगे. But there was a scenario where pension verification was not getting done because the person, the block development officer, did not have a particular login that he could access and clear some things. So we actually saw that once the login changed, he was given the login access of a collector. And you could see that just with the change of login credentials, a BDO now is executing the functions delegated to a collector. So you could, I mean, the implications of that it doesn't actually matter who you are, आपके पास सही login, सही digital signature या गलत digital signature आए, तो the kind of actions you can also execute. In our case, it was helpful because हम उसके सर पे बैठे थे कि वो ठीक करे, and he said नहीं है तो इसे login मंगाओ. But what is it actually doing in our country if just by logins are running what's supposed to be run and not the administrative hierarchy? कि एक BDO DM का काम कर पा रहा है क्योंकि उसके पास उसका login मिल गया है. It should leave us thinking what is possible.
Second part of the question, you want to take that? You asked 2 questions. Okay, we have been given kill time, but last question, that is my prerogative. No, yeah. No question? Okay, so you DM them. Okay, that's the best thing to do. Thank you very much. Just wanted to end on this one note. When we began the conversation, I did say that our job is to keep looking at the glass, the part of the glass which is half full. There's lots of things which are happening which are very good. And a lot of people who have their pension fund account, EPFO, LIC policies and all that, they are benefiting from it because they have the right access, and that's the whole point today. I wanted to get my money out of my EPFO. It took me like 30 minutes because I have a computer, I have a time, I have everything. But someone who's living in Jharkhand or Chhattisgarh, a government employee, for them it's no, you keep going to the internet cafe, you keep logging in, logging out, and it's a very difficult thing. So life there is not same. And that's why we keep saying, good things are happening, fine, but the glass is half full. Until the glass is full totally, that is our job. And that, I think, is my job, and that's what I think we've been talking about this whole afternoon. Thank you very much for coming here, and as they say, our DMs are open. Thank you, bye-bye.
Before the panelists leave the stage, We wanted to actually tell you that last year when we conducted Digital Citizen Summit, we collaborated with dignitaries like you. And we have a product that we wanted to release. I would like to call Anjana Divakar from CDPP to give you a small introduction about the journal release and then ask the panelists to please release the journal.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. I'm Anjana Divakar. I am associated with the Center for Development Policy and Practice. Firstly, it's just wonderful to be associated with the DCS and for 2 times in a row. I'd like to begin by saying that CDPP's role in DCS specifically as an organizer, a partner, but mainly as an academic partner. So the Center for Development Policy and Practice is a research institute that works on several public policy issues and developments in the country. We're based out of Hyderabad. And as part of the academic partnership that we have with the DCS and with the DEF, we run a journal, which is the Journal of Development Policy and Practice. So the Journal of Development Policy and Practice is currently in its 10th year of publication. The uniqueness of this particular journal is that we try and bridge the gap between scholarship and practice. Over the 10 years, we've developed a very eminent editorial board with the likes of Professor Amitabh Kundu. We have Professor James Copestake from University of Bath. These are just a few names, but we have a mix of both academic and practitioners that are on our board. We have Mr. Osama Manzar, we have Mr. Anshu Gupta from Goonj. These are just a couple of names. As an academic partner, what we've tried to do here is to bridge this policy and practice gap. The journal focuses on broad issues of public policy, but we've also tried to make special issues that we call in this academic language. We've had a couple of special issues earlier, and the conversation started going that if we're doing DCS, we should also have an output where the scholarship and practice comes together. And thus was developed this idea that we will have a special issue which will be called Technology and Society. And last year, we had a wonderful response by both academia and practitioners who submitted their very well-written research papers. We went through a process here where they presented at the DCS and they went through the journal process. And here is the product for the DCS 2023. I would like the esteemed panel to release the journal. I would like to call on Mr. Osama Manzar also to be here on stage.
So in one line, this is a product of last year's DCS, academically proven, right? And tomorrow there will be discussion or paper presentation also parallelly to this, which will be published next year. So yeah, so it's a whole year of academic. That is also one of the things, because this is what actually goes to the bureaucrats' room to figure out what policies should be made. And that's the reason why this is important. Thank you. Thank you.